Hello everyone, it's Aaron here from Push Square with our first PS5 review of 2025. This time Robert Ramsey's been tackling Dynasty Warriors Origins. So let's see how it fared in this PS5 review. What a difference 7 years makes. In 2018, the dismal Dynasty Warriors 9 effectively put Koei Tecmo's storied hack-and-slash series on ice, but Dynasty Warriors Origins is a completely different beast. For the first time in generations, the franchise feels fresh again, a genuine evolution of what's come before. Now to be clear, Origins is not Dynasty Warriors 10. There are fundamental differences here that make Origins its own standalone thing. But at the same time, it doesn't quite feel like your typical spin-off, because the production values are what you would expect from an all-or-nothing mainline sequel. Origins is structured unlike any Dynasty Warriors title before it. Instead of jumping between stages via a menu, it adopts a story-based format that has more in common with RPGs. The whole game takes place on a world map that you're free to traverse, visiting locations, characters and battlefields as you go. It's not open world, but it is player driven. You assume the role of a mysterious young man who just so happens to be a dangerously skilled martial artist. The beginning of the game sees you cross paths with the legendary warlord Guan Yu, and in turn, you're introduced to the turbulent Three Kingdoms era of Chinese history, now told through the eyes of your silent wanderer. We say Three Kingdoms, but as the name suggests, Origins is more about the beginnings of this war-torn age. It covers, in much greater detail than ever before, the events that lead up to the climactic battle of Chibi, which in previous games was often utilised as a stage-setting clash rather than a dramatic conclusion. You could argue that Origins' overarching plot is forced to end just as it's really starting to heat up, but this is still a hefty historical adventure. The campaign clocks in at around 30 hours, but that's counting for just one part of the game's three-pronged narrative. About halfway through said campaign, you're presented a crucial decision. You need to side with one of China's three rising factions, Shu, Wei or Wu, and play out the rest of the story from that perspective. Now you're going to bond with a completely different cast of characters and engage in unique faction-specific battles depending on that choice. Basically, this structure triples Origins' potential runtime, making it one of the most robust Dynasty Warrior games ever made, despite the fact that it only covers about 1/3 of the overall Three Kingdoms saga. Ultimately, this focus on earlier events works out brilliantly. Characters are given much more room to breathe, and the storytelling benefits massively as a result. What's more, being able to interact with these key figures from the perspective of a single player protagonist keeps everyone grounded. Familiar Dynasty Warrior faces have simply never seemed so human. The often comical caricatures of past games have been given genuine depth here for the first time. Now getting to know these heroes and villains through fully voiced bonding scenes adds a surprising amount of weight to your faction related decision. By siding with Wei, for example, you know that somewhere down the line you'll have no choice but to march into battle against those who you had once called friends. This makes for some deliciously dramatic and often bittersweet moments during key conflicts. Thankfully, upon completing the campaign, you're given free rein on returning to previous chapters or even individual battles. You also get to keep all of your progress, levels, abilities and weapons, which makes replays a breeze. Naturally, most players will want to jump straight back to the all-important faction choice and decide on a different path. As such, you don't have to be worrying about replaying the entire game at least 3 times if you want to see everything, which is actually much appreciated. There is one part of the story that doesn't quite hit as hard as it should, however, and it boils down to your amnesiac protagonist. Now to be fair, the setup surrounding this unnamed hero is somewhat interesting, but as your tale unfurls, it just can't match up against the drama and tension of the central Three Kingdoms narrative and starts to feel like a slightly annoying distraction from the stuff that at this point you're truly invested in. Now fortunately, narrative stumbles are all but forgotten when you take to the field. The sheer scale of main story battles in Origins cannot be understated. These are some of the most impressively gigantic encounters that we've seen in gaming. They're sometimes on par with what you would find in a modern Total War title, but you are right there in the thick of it playing a full-on action game. This is where Origins solidifies itself as a true evolution of the series. These clashes finally feel like the realization of Dynasty Warriors' long-standing 1 versus 1000 design philosophy, as your most devastating special attacks cleave through hundreds of troops in an instant. At its peak, when you can barely make out what's happening thanks to the writhing mass of on-screen chaos, Origins is intoxicating. Which brings us on to the combat itself. The core of Dynasty Warriors action remains intact with simple, sweeping combos letting you mash your way through waves of grunts, but the biggest alteration manifests when you're up against enemy officers. Now, officer fights emphasise a back and forth that builds on defensive actions like parries and dodges. After dealing with your opponent's onslaught, you take advantage of their vulnerable state, combos and abilities of your own, breaking their morale, which is basically a stamina bar, in the process. Once that's depleted, they're left wide open, and you'll either strike for huge damage or deliver a final blow with an immensely satisfying weapon-specific finisher. The actual rhythm of combat may take some getting used to if you're familiar with other warrior games, because it's evolved beyond that hack and slash, borderline button mashing basis. This is a much more reactionary system akin to what you contend with in a character action title, and in our opinion, it works really well. In making officer encounters more involved and strategic, they stand apart from the regular troop-crushing combat. Straightforward basics give way to some intense skirmishes as the game progresses, and honing your skills against the toughest of foes, shout out to Lu Bu, provides a great sense of growth. That said, there comes a point where repetition does start to set in. All of your enemies submit to the same mechanics, and with only 12 different weapon types to learn from a defensive standpoint, more skilled players could grow weary of longer battles where sturdy health bars are your only real obstacle. Dynasty Warriors has a long history of offering up colossal playable character rosters, but that isn't the case in Origins. While your protagonist is capable of wielding 10 different weapon types, each with their own movesets, abilities and unique mechanics, some fans will undoubtedly miss the unbridled variety that was once present in games like Dynasty Warriors 8 Extreme Legends. But again, this is just the way that Origins is designed, with a singular, playable character perspective in mind. And for what it's worth, you do get to play as a small selection of other heroes, albeit only temporarily. In most story battles, you can team up with a companion, who you'll fight alongside until their Musu bar is full, and when it is, you can take direct control of them for a limited time. Your allies can dish out some serious destruction, so they're best utilised as another kind of super attack. And honestly, you might need it. Origins can become very tricky very quickly if you don't keep an eye on the surrounding battlefield. The series has always had strategic leanings, but Origins can be particularly punishing. You don't need to babysit every ally across the map, thank God, but you will need to race over to certain characters and give them a helping hand from time to time, if only so that the opposing army doesn't break through your formation. Keeping track of battles isn't too difficult, it's mostly just a case of actually listening to what your allies are saying and following the general plan that's explained at the war table before each encounter, but Origins knows how to keep you on your toes, and we go far as to say that it features some of the most engaging maps in the franchise. In many ways, Dynasty Warriors Origins is the series at its best. The gigantic, jaw-dropping battles, the tense wartime drama, the player-driven power trip is a thoroughly impressive return to form for a franchise that came so close to dismantling itself 7 years ago. Origins isn't just some water-testing spin-off. This is both an evolution of the formula and a fantastic realisation of what Dynasty Warriors has always strived to be. We're giving Dynasty Warriors Origins an 8 out of 10. Thank you everyone for checking out our review of Dynasty Warriors Origins. Let me know down in the comments if you plan to pick this one up on PS5. And while you're there, remember to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed this review, and even better, subscribe to the channel for more PlayStation video content just like this. Anyway, until next time, I've been Aaron, and this has been Push Square.